All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Here we are in chapter number 2, as mentioned a few minutes ago. Today's episode is about three main topics divided into three chapters. We just finished chapter number 1. In case you haven't listened to it, you can go and listen to it because this one is some sort of continuity of what we have been talking about for more than 1 hour now. This chapter is about digital communication language and coding. It is equally long as the first chapter, meaning that you have to plan at least 1 hour, more or less, to say the least. And also, I am still not even sure that I provided everything because it is such an interesting topic. It is such a deep topic and wide, and there is a lot to uncover. But hey, here we are. I have done my best, and hopefully you can enjoy the content. Without further ado, let us start. Again, chapter number 3 is also coming, and for us to understand the whole background and the constellation of all three, I would encourage to listen to all three, to go and do your own research. The video version is to be found on my YouTube channel as well as Rumble, and the written version, in case you prefer to read, on my LinkedIn page as well as on X. And also the music, the soundtracks, as I said, the links are in the bio. And please feedback me how all that is feeling, like all that is working for you. Does the music help you? Does it annoy you? Your feedback is wished and very much welcome. Without losing more time, please let us dig into it. So enjoy.
Human communication has undergone only a handful of structural revolutions: the emergence of speech, the invention of writing, the rise of alphabetic literacy, the arrival of print, and now the advent of digital code. Each shift has reorganized not only how people express themselves, but also how societies think, coordinate, and remember. Digital language marks the newest of these transformations, one whose depth becomes visible only when placed against this long arc of human expression. If printing built the linguistic architecture of the modern world, digital code is constructing the architecture of whatever comes next. Its defining feature is unprecedented. For the first time in human history, every message is addressed to two audiences simultaneously: other humans, who interpret meaning, and computational systems, which interpret structure. This dual audience environment transforms expression into signal as well as communication, embedding every utterance within layers of semantic, visual, and algorithmic interpretation. Consider a simple example. Someone sends a heart emoji to a friend. For the human recipient, it conveys affection, warmth, reassurance. For the platform, it registers as an interaction event. For a sentiment model, as a positive emotional marker. For a ranking algorithm, as part of a behavioral pattern that influences what both sender and recipient will see next. A single symbol thus performs multiple linguistic functions across multiple layers of interpretation. This layered logic, not the devices themselves, defines the digital linguistic epoch. In this chapter, digital language refers to any expressive form that is simultaneously interpretable by humans and computational systems, and that derives meaning from both semantic content and machinic processing. This includes emojis, shorthand dialects, code snippets, hashtags, embedded media, formats produced by platforms, and the algorithmic feedback loops that act upon them. Digital language is not merely the content that humans exchange. It is the entire communicative environment in which humans and machines jointly participate. Digital language, therefore, must be understood not as a novelty of contemporary life, but as the 21st century's emerging linguistic ecosystem, a system with its own structures, operations, and modes of meaning-making. It unfolds across 4 interconnected domains: the symbolic, the social, the procedural, and the algorithmic. Together, these domains reorganize the foundations of human expression. The stakes are profound. Digital language reshapes cognition by altering how information is processed, identity by creating new markers of belonging and performance, communication by transforming how messages circulate and mutate, and power by enabling algorithms to participate actively in the distribution and recognition of meaning. The digital sphere also restores multimodality to a central place in everyday expression. Where print privileged linear text, digital communication is inherently layered: textual, visual, symbolic, auditory, and procedural. Emojis act as emotional operators. GIFs operate as micronarratives. Images carry semantic weight. Code performs actions, and metadata silently governs visibility. Meaning arises not from a single channel, but from the interplay between channels. At the same time, the digital world is generating microlanguages, rapidly evolving dialects shaped by communities, platforms, and cultural microclimates. Abbreviations, mimetic phrases, reaction symbols, and context-dependent shorthand function as linguistic currencies that emerge, peak, and fade at a pace unthinkable in the print era. Their grammar is social, not institutional. Their authority is collective, not centralized. Parallel to this human-facing layer exists a more formal linguistic domain: programming languages, which represent a new class of language altogether. They do not describe, they instruct. Their meaning is executable. They require logical precision that has no analog in spoken or printed vernaculars. And they form the deep operational layer of the digital world, the layer upon which platforms, applications, protocols, and networks are built. Beneath both human expression and machine instruction lies a third layer: algorithmic communication, the silent and invisible mode through which digital systems interpret, classify, sort, and respond to human language. Algorithms read messages for patterns, tone, relevance, and behavioral signals. They determine what appears, what spreads, and what remains unseen. In this environment, meaning is no longer a human monopoly. It becomes a co-production between human intention and computational inference. Our analytical approach in this chapter is structural rather than technological. We do not study devices or interfaces. Instead, we examine the internal logic of digital expression, its forms, functions, constraints, and consequences. We treat digital language as a linguistic system with its own grammar, its own pragmatics, and its own semiotic economy. The central motif guiding our analysis is layering, the way digital communication operates simultaneously at the human, symbolic, and algorithmic levels. Through this framework, digital language appears not as an extension of print, but as a distinct linguistic order, one that reorganizes how humans express themselves, how meaning circulates, how communities form, and how communication acquires consequence. Digital language and code, the grammar of a world that is reading itself. You wake before you speak. Before your day even reaches conscious language, your hands are already performing the gestures of a new form of literacy. The thumb swipe, the index finger tap, the brief hesitation before a video begins to autoplay, these are no longer trivial habits. They are learned actions inside a communicative system that starts reading you long before you begin consciously reading it. The upward flick quietly asks for narrative continuation. The double tap performs a small ritual of public approval. The long press reveals hidden layers beneath the visible surface, almost like a sentence exposing deeper meanings only to readers who know where to look. The feed that greets you is not simply a sequence of posts. It is a choreography of micro-experiences optimized for emotional acceleration. Elements rise and fall with algorithmically tuned rhythm. A compressed headline engineered for interruption more than information, an image calibrated for a 1-second emotional spike, a text fragment structured to be consumed at velocity rather than contemplation. You compose a message to a friend, then remove the final period because it seems too cold, too authoritarian. You choose an emoji not merely to decorate meaning, but to regulate tone in a communicative field where tone can collapse within milliseconds. You hesitate over the phrasing not because you fear human misunderstanding, but because you sense, implicitly, that there is a second reader, an unseen computational audience whose interpretive logic will determine whether your sentence travels, surfaces, or disappears. Long before the day's first human encounter, you have already entered a communicative ecology unprecedented in human history, an environment where language lives a double life, addressed simultaneously to consciousness and calculation. Digital language is not slang, nor decline, nor the erosion of literacy. It is a redesigned semiotic environment in which every utterance is crafted for two irreconcilable readers, a human mind searching for meaning and a machine optimized to extract patterns. For the first time, language operates under a dual imperative: to say something to someone and to do something in a system. For the first time, writing unfolds under double vision. The dual audience, humans and machines in the same sentence. The dual audience, humans and machines in the same sentence. In print culture, writers imagined only human readers, familiar or anonymous, contemporary or future, hostile or sympathetic, but always human. In digital culture, every public expression encounters a second, equally consequential audience: algorithmic systems that rank, sort, amplify, suppress, and recirculate linguistic acts according to predictive models rather than meaning. For example, consider a seemingly banal post. Morning ritual with coffee picture and bread, #discipline, #focus. To a friend, the phrase evokes a quiet scene, warm light, controlled aspiration, a carefully curated moment of morning identity performed with aesthetic restraint. To the platform, the same sentence disassembles into computational units. Morning becomes a temporal signature. Ritual signals participation in a lifestyle microgenre. The coffee emoji enters a sentiment cluster associated with warmth and calm. The sparkles augment emotional positivity. The hashtags supply classification vectors directing the sentence into topic niches. The posting time becomes behavioral data, and the engagement metrics to come will recalibrate the system's assumptions about similar content. The human reader encounters meaning. The machine encounters structure. Modern writing, therefore, is no longer composed solely for comprehension. It is composed for circulation, discoverability, and algorithmic legibility. Search engine logic infiltrates syntax. Caption writing becomes an act of infrastructural negotiation. Tagging transforms from an act of acknowledgement into a mechanism of algorithmic routing. We no longer write only to be understood. We write to be positioned. When language becomes data. In digital systems, a sentence does not remain a sentence. It becomes an object to be acted upon. Take the deceptively simple phrase, "I'm fine." A human reader might detect emotional ambiguity, irony, resignation, quiet despair, depending on context and interpersonal history. The machine, however, conducts a different operation. It tokenizes the phrase, converts it into vectors, compares it against statistical archives, assigns a sentiment probability score, and predicts its potential to generate replies or extend viewing time. The machine is not asking what fine means. It is asking what fine normally leads to. Meaning becomes behavioral prediction. In the print era, interpretation was a hermeneutic act. What does the sentence signify? In the platform era, interpretation is computational. What is the pattern forecast? Once processed, The sentence enters an attention economy where its visibility is determined by probabilistic models rather than editorial judgment or human curiosity. Expression becomes actionable data. Circulation becomes the real content. The collapse of print-era assumptions. Digital communication does not continue the print tradition. It rewrites its foundations. Print assumed a single audience. Digital writing faces multiple simultaneous interpretive layers. Print assumed the sentence as the basic unit of meaning. Digital environments distribute meaning across threads, replies, remixes, stitched videos, layered commentaries. Print imagined text as stable. Digital text is editable, retractable, resurrectable by algorithms indifferent to original context. Print trusted editors to curate visibility. Digital platforms outsource this role to ranking systems trained on engagement histories rather than cultural significance. Microsyntax as self-performance. Stripped of tone, gesture, and bodily presence, digital writing evolves new microsyntactic tools to manage emotional nuance. The difference between okay, and okay becomes socially significant, indexing irritation, finality, or drifting uncertainty. Emoji, once ornamental, now function as effective regulators that modulate the temperature of a sentence with extraordinary precision. They also become signals for machine reading. High-arousal emotional content tends to circulate more strongly, creating a quiet pressure toward emotional performance. Users absorb this logic unconsciously. Over time, they begin to feel and eventually to produce the emotions most likely to travel. We do not merely write ourselves. We algorithmically perform ourselves. Visual grammar and multimodal cognition. Digital platforms revive pre-literate modes of communication, image, rhythm, gesture, reconfigured through technological mediation. A meme template such as expectation versus reality functions as a visual grammar. Before the viewer sees the content, the structural contrast is already cognitively activated. The template is a syntactic unit. Short-form video intensifies this multimodal complexity. Meaning emerges not from text alone, but from the interdependence of written captions, music cues, facial expressions, timing, filters, and editing rhythms. The digital utterance is an orchestrated semantic event composed across multiple channels. Reading becomes a multimodal act of inference. Language expands beyond alphabetic form. Thought becomes audiovisual. Acceleration and the evolution of expression. Linguistic evolution, once measurable in generations, now unfolds in weeks. A phrase appears spontaneously, ascends into ubiquity, collapses under irony, fragments into meta-commentary, and disappears. The cycle resembles evolutionary selection under extreme pressure. Brevity, emotional sharpness, modularity, and interface compatibility determine linguistic survival. Platform architecture becomes the environment in which language mutates. Character limits compress expression. Recommendation systems encourage certain tonalities. Autocomplete shapes vocabulary. The medium evolves the message faster than human culture can fully register the shift. Language adapts to infrastructure as organisms adapt to habitat. Quantified expression and algorithmic authority. In digital contexts, the markers of public approval are not subtle, but numerically explicit. A post with 10,000 likes carries the impression of cultural gravity. A post with 6 likes risks invisibility. These metrics feed back into composition, shaping not only what people write, but what they feel permitted to write. Phrases such as unpopular opinion, or no one is talking about this, but function as rhetorical devices engineered for activation rather than genuine contrarianism. Visibility becomes capital. Capital becomes authority. In this environment, language is not simply expressive, It is strategic, calibrated for circulation and survival within attention-driven economies. Networked meaning and distributed authorship. Print culture assumed linear confrontation with ideas. One text, one argument, one reader at a time. Digital culture functions more like a branching network. A post generates replies. Replies generate counter-replies. Court layers recontextualize the original. Stitched videos reframe its meaning entirely. Meaning does not reside in the original utterance. It emerges through collective accretion. The intellectual unit of the digital age is not the paragraph or the essay, but the unfolding networked conversation, a constantly shifting terrain in which authorship disperses and interpretation becomes communal. Code as the hidden grammar of visibility. Beneath visible language lies the deeper performative system, code. Algorithms do not simply host communication, they enact consequences upon it. A ranking model silently determines whether a sentence appears in a feed. Moderation systems decide what cannot circulate at all. Predictive text proposes words before the writer has consciously chosen them. Code becomes a co-author of expression. In this sense, computational performativity differs from linguistic performativity. Where speech acts announce their transformative intentions, I declare, I promise, I pronounce. Algorithmic operations transform the world silently, without ceremony, through the act of scoring, ranking, or filtering. The system reads us. The system writes with us and sometimes without us. Conclusion: the world that speaks and computes. We inhabit an era in which language is simultaneously expression and data, narrative and input, metaphor and metric. Every sentence is tokenized and modeled. Every emotion becomes quantifiable. Every utterance competes for algorithmic visibility inside opaque systems that read, classify, and circulate our words before other humans ever see them. Language no longer merely represents reality. It intermediates between consciousness and computation. We speak. Systems score. Distribution follows prediction. In this double reading world, the grammar of expression is being rewritten, not through decree or cultural consensus, but through the quiet but relentless logics of design. When multimodality returns, with language as signal and data. The return of multimodality in digital culture is not a novelty, but a reconfiguration of long-standing human semiotic capacities. Speech, gesture, writing, image, now orchestrated by interfaces that render each utterance simultaneously meaningful to people and legible to machines. Multimodal expression therefore couples social semiotics, how ensembles of modes make meaning, with algorithmic governance, how platforms interpret, sort, and amplify those ensembles. In this regime, a smiley, a looping GIF, a caption, and a hashtag are not merely stylistic, they are instructions for both humans and machines. Emojis as semantic modifiers. First, pragmatics, from ornament to operator. Empirically and theoretically, emojis function as pragmatic operators. Their principal contribution is to modify tone, stance, and implied intent rather than to replace words. McCulloch's linguistic account treats emojis as written gestures that restore embodied cues to text, a claim supported by broader multimodality research. Emojis calibrate irony, soften directives, and mark affiliative warmth. Now to visual reconstruction. A reaction GIF comment. Reply GIF, a looping headshake from a well-known TV character. Human semantic layer. Disapproval plus mild humor. Shared fan literacy. Machine metadata layer. Platform infers TV scene via computer vision, surrounding text and alt text. If present, add keywords. File type flagged as animated. Behavioral signal layer. High response rate, time on thread increase, potential ranking lift. Visual reconstruction. Hybrid post grammar walkthrough. Asset. Square image, product at center, high key light, caption with 2 emojis, 3 hashtags. Composition and salience. Central placement plus high contrast foreground the product as giving new collapsed into ready to consume. Interpersonal cues. A shallow depth of field and warm color temperature suggest intimacy trust. Emojis in captions soften promotional tone. Textual cohesion. Hashtags segment topic and audience. Line breaks, structure scanning. Machine legibility. Unicode code points for emojis. Hashtags parsed as metadata. Computer vision labels attached to the image object. Behavioral signal. Saves forwards predict future ranking. Quick likes suggest low friction engagement. Comments indicate depth. Interleaving principle. Language as signal and data. Across emojis, GIFs, and hybrid posts, every digital utterance doubles its existence. 1. Semantic meaning. Human interpretation of tone, stance, content. 2. Machine-readable metadata. Unicode categories, emoji sequences, hashtags as social tagging folksonomy, alt text, inferred labels. 3. Behavioral signal. Clicks, dwell, reactions that becomes input to ranking. Emoji as data. UDR UTS number 51 codifies emoji properties, presentation, modifiers, ZWJ sequences. Sentiment lexicons trained on large corpora make emojis directly usable for automated classification. Hashtags as metadata. Hashtags operate as searchable talk, simultaneously topic markers, interpersonal stand staking, and textual organizers, formalizing ambient affiliation at scale. Algorithmic reading. Platforms interpret these signals to sort feeds, producing consequential politics of visibility. The newsfeed and comparable systems exemplify this world-making capacity of algorithms. Implication. Multimodality is not merely more expressive, it is more legible to humans, richer pragmatics, and to machines, richer feature sets. The public sphere that results is, in part, co-authored by computational arbiters that rank multimodal signals. Conclusion. Multimodality as human-machine co-articulation. Multimodality returns by reinstating gesture and image inside writing, but under new platform conditions. Every semiotic choice, emoji, GIF, composition, hashtag, is co-interpreted pragmatically by people and computationally by systems. The result is an amplified pragmatics, richer human nuance, yoked to an amplified legibility, which together govern visibility and participation in digital publics. Microlanguages and rapid dialects, shorthand, meme languages and platform dialects. Digital microlanguages are not stylistic curiosities. They are the operating systems of contemporary public discourse. They emerge where human constraints meet computational architectures. In such environments, users learn to make meaning with ruthless efficiency, compressing words, iterating templates, and converging on platform-native ways of talking that the system can parse and promote. The result is a recurrent pattern, compression, iteration, vernacularization, through which communities first discover marginal hacks, then stabilize them into shared forms, and finally naturalize them as the default way we speak here. Far from trivial, these forms are indexical. They signal who we are operational. They determine what gets surfaced and historical. They crystallize the affordances and pressures of the systems through which they circulate. This chapter develops that claim by combining a documented timeline with an analytic triad, shorthand, meme languages, platform dialects, enriched by reconstructible exhibits, and a methods memo to make the argument replicable. Compressed timeline of microlanguage evolution between 1982 to 2026. The evolution of digital vernaculars accelerates whenever a new constraint or distribution logic enters public use. Early on, the challenge was tone in text-only environments. Later, it became speed, then audiovisual timing, then algorithmic visibility and moderation. In 1982, Scott Fallman's proposal, Smiley Face, Sad Face, on a Carnegie Mellon bulletin board inaugurated a platform-native paralinguistic system for marking jokes and seriousness. It is an archetypal case in which a local repair becomes a global convention through replication and institutional memory. In the 1990s, 2000s, the 160-character SMS ceiling and the widespread adoption of predictive T9 input cultivated a culture of compression. Acronyms, vowel drop, numeronyms, that later migrated into social media comments and captions, materially shaping how brevity, timing, and stance would be performed at scale. Around 2000, 2007, proto-meme languages hardened. All your base are belong to us spread as a mistranslation turned catchphrase, demonstrating that error can become idiom through templated repetition across forums and flash videos. Its longevity traces not to a single artifact, but to the template's portability across modalities.
Okay, all right. So after 30 minutes, I would say it is time for us to have a small break, a break during which we can enjoy a little bit of music as usual. Do not forget, please comment, share, let me know what you think about these soundtracks that I usually play during an episode because your feedback is valuable, definitely. So, one question before we go into that small break: what have you guys learned about digital communication up until now? What is that information or that input that was completely new to you? Because this is an environment where we all are involved. So, let's say that most of the things we have heard about them, but here we are trying to do or pose an analysis in the sense where we are trying to understand the deeper layers under what we are experiencing today. So it would be interesting to know what you have learned, what you have heard for the first time, what you think it is definitely valuable for you. Do not hesitate to comment in the comment section. And without further ado, as usual, please let us go into a break. After the break, we come back and continue. And maybe, spoiler alert, I think that section 2 or chapter 2 can actually be ramp up for less than 1 hour. But hey, no, please do not rejoice before time. Let us see how it goes for us. So enjoy the music and we continue right after that.
I kept it in my mouth like a coin too cold to spend. You said say it clean, so I said it once again. The first shape changes when hands keep passing it along, but the cut on the edge still tells me where it went wrong. Soft then corrected, then softer still. We learn the line by bending to it. Form of memory, hold it with me. Men and women sing, but the ears can't keep. Form of memory, tell it gently, hold it with me. Truth stays when we breathe. A name on paper fades, but the mouth remembers wait. Every careful answer is a door that learns to wait. What was taken from us comes back in borrowed keys. In a house of echoes, we keep the shape.
Quantification of language. A. Metrics. Quantification is the hinge between expression and distribution. Platforms select a small set of measurable proxies, watch time, completion rate, comments, saves, shares, survey satisfaction, and make them the operative meaning of value. Change the proxy, and you change what speech is rewarded. Dominant metrics by ecosystem. YouTube. In 2012, YouTube explicitly shifted discovery from views to watch time to curb clickbait and prioritize videos that retain attention. Watch time became the currency of ranking and recommendation. This is the canonical example of a platform redefining success via a metric. Facebook. On January 11th, 2018, the newsfeed update prioritized meaningful social interactions, comment-rich, back-and-forth threads among friends family, while warning that many pages would experience declines in reach, watch time, and referral traffic. This represented a normative pivot, conversation quality over passive reactions or publisher virality. TikTok. TikTok's For You feed ranks through interest prediction, giving high weight to watch time, completed views, rewatches, and interaction cues. Device and account settings are lower weight factors. The system adapts within the first 100 impressions, which is why unknown creators can scale rapidly when early completion signals are strong. Instagram. Practitioner standards define engagement rate as 100, but recommend normalizing by reach or impressions, not followers, when non-follower exposure is substantial, to avoid vanity inflation and better reflect algorithmic distribution. Twitter X. Industry calculators and guides use impressions-based divided by impressions 100, with widely observed medians in the low tenths or hundredths of a percent at scale, an empirical reminder that exposure is not equal to interaction. Search. While SEO discourse often treats dwell time as a ranking signal, Google spokespeople have repeatedly denied its direct use. Bing, by contrast, historically called similar measures a signal we watch. The prudent stance: treat dwell time-like behavior as diagnostic of satisfaction, not a guaranteed causal lever in ranking. Timeline note: YouTube. The view watch time pivot in 2012 and the later incorporation of satisfaction and integrity signals bracket a decade of metric reweighting that changed how creators script, package, and serialize content. How metrics are engineered into practice. Creators systematically learn the loss function. On YouTube, series architecture and playlists extend session time and strengthen authority signals. One of the most common, explicit strategies to satisfy the time well spent, objective, and gain broader distribution. On Instagram and Twitter X, switching to by reach impressions and reporting avoids flattering illusions when growth stems from algorithmic exposure rather than true audience response. Measurement pathologies. Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. Goodhart's law predicts, and platform history confirms, that actors optimize the proxy while underlying quality stagnates. The literature across economics and engineering documents these gaming dynamics and urges multi-metric bundles to dampen them. Sidebar evidence tension. Despite the goal of boosting community conversation and supporting local news, an independent study at the Toe Center observed that 11 of 13 metro publishers saw interaction declines in the 9 weeks following the pro-local tweak, an empirical reminder that metric intentions is not equal to ecosystem outcomes. B. Virality. Virality is the rate, reach, and reproduction number of linguistic acts. In public feeds, Heavy tail power law behavior is routine. A small fraction of items captures disproportionate attention while a long tail receives little, hence, overnight creators and the persistence of near zero reach posts. This is not an anomaly, but a structural baseline of diffusion in networked systems. Independence from size. A 15-year, multi-language Facebook dataset of 57 M posts shows virality is not dictated by outlet size. Moreover, engagement from unreliable sources decays over time, complicating claims that follower base alone governs spread. Breadth versus depth and why it matters. Encrypted messaging ecosystems force precision. On WhatsApp, large-scale studies using privacy-preserving measurements show two distinct axes of virality. Breadth, how widely a message fans out across groups. Depth, how long the forwarding chain grows. Empirical work reveals that high breadth often stems from complex contagion, social reinforcement within dense communities, while policy typically targets depth. This mismatch matters. Product limits on forwarding reduce depth, but hybrid spread persists through parallel group seeding. Case crisis and product friction. In 2018, after lethal rumor cascades linked to WhatsApp forwards, the platform imposed forwarding caps and removed quick forward buttons, explicitly reframing virality as a design parameter. These interventions slowed diffusion and added warning labels, but modeling indicates they delay rather than fully block propagation in public groups, a meaningful but partial control. C. Platform-specific virality logics. TikTok. Official explainers list user interactions, watch time, complete views, and video information as core features. Early completion velocity can trigger distribution waves, with the model updating within the first 100 impressions. Hence, followers matter less than content to viewer fit. YouTube. In 2019, YouTube reweighted its system to raise authoritative sources for news information and reduce recommendations of borderline content, reporting about a 70% drop in watch time of such borderline content from non-subscriber recommendations in the US. Later, these changes expanded internationally. This is a direct example of curtailing virality through objective function edits. Heavy-tailed takeaway. Because diffusion is power law-like, minor reweights can produce outsized effects in what audiences actually see. D. Engagement logic. Engagement logic is the bundle of incentives, product levers, and policy constraints that define what gets rewarded or suppressed. Multi-objective ranking and explicit trade-offs. Modern recommenders optimize multiple objectives: engagement, satisfaction, integrity, safety, revenue, brand suitability, and diversity novelty, all under tight latency budgets. Crucially, several platforms now publish the policy intent behind weight changes. Facebook's 2018 MSI prioritize comment-driven conversations among close ties, accepting reduced distribution for pages that cannot elicit such discussion. YouTube's 2019 edit raise authoritativeness in news and reduce borderline recommendations, an explicit statement that accuracy integrity outrank raw engagement in sensitive domains. Creator adaptation and metric drift. TikTok creators front-load hooks and optimize completion rewatch. Repeating the same template can be penalized by variety filters consistent with the system's rapid interest tracking. YouTube creators tune thumbnail CTR retention and use playlist series to expand session time, an engineered response to a time well spent objective. As predicted by Goodhart's law, narrow metric targets induce engagement bait and retention hacks, degrading signal quality. Governance requires bundled metrics and periodic recalibration. E. Engagement redirected toward care. Pinterest's compassionate search integrates well-being exercises, routes self-harm queries to authoritative resources, and deploys ML to downrank self-injury content. Pinterest reports an 88% drop in user reports of such content after these changes and faster removal times. An illustrative case where engagement metrics are repurposed to surface help, not purely maximize time spent. F. Satisfaction, raw minutes. Public communications and practitioner syntheses emphasize time well spent and viewer satisfaction, not just minutes, especially for YouTube's search news services. Surveys and long clicks are used to penalize empty watch time, preventing low-value retention from dominating ranking. Closing. What digital language means for human civilization. We no longer speak across neutral channels. We speak through an engineered stack whose layers increasingly constitute public language itself. At the deepest level, systems such as Unicode, CLDR, ICU, and OpenType determine what can be written, rendered, sorted, segmented, and recognized across billions of devices. Above them, protocols such as ActivityPub, Matrix, WebSub, and authenticated email systems govern how speech circulates, who can reach whom, and under what conditions communication remains visible or trusted. Above that layer, algorithms rank, classify, filter, and prioritize information, transforming language into measurable, governable, and economically actionable data. Digital language, therefore, is no longer simply communication. It is infrastructure, the constitution of expression. Modern text depends on invisible technical grammars. Unicode established a universal code space for writing systems, while CLDR and ICU standardized plural rules, calendars, segmentation, collation, and script behavior across global software ecosystems. OpenType shaping engines then transformed abstract characters into readable language by handling ligatures, directionality, joining systems, and script-specific rendering. Together, these systems silently shaped what readers experienced as normal, correct, or even legible language. But digital uniformity also required trust. Unicode normalization systems ensured that visually identical strings behaved consistently across platforms, while security mechanisms emerged to defend against mixed script deception and identity spoofing. The rise of IDN homograph attacks demonstrated that typography itself could become a vector of impersonation. In the digital era, string policy became identity policy. Even language tags acquired infrastructural power. Small metadata markers such as srcyrel or ES for 19 determine collation, font fallback, segmentation, search behavior, and rendering logic. Language became executable configuration. At times, infrastructure even altered the economics of speech itself. A single non-GSM character, an emoji or curved quotation mark, could reduce SMS capacity and increase transmission cost. Encoding quietly became policy. Protocols as the grammar of public speech. If Unicode governed what language looked like, protocols governed how language moved. Federated systems such as ActivityPub and Matrix transformed communication into distributed event networks where messages propagated across servers rather than remaining inside centralized platforms. In these environments, speech became partially decentralized, but also fragmented. Replication lag, divergent moderation, and inconsistent visibility produced multiple simultaneous versions of public reality. Other systems altered communication by restructuring distribution itself. WebSub replaced constant polling with push-based notification flows. Email authentication protocols such as SPF, DKIM, and MARC transformed deliverability into a compliance regime where technical alignment increasingly determined audibility. At the same time, governments recognized that infrastructure rules could shape public discourse without directly censoring content. India's 2016 rejection of zero rating and the American rollback of net neutrality protections demonstrated two opposing philosophies of informational access. one treating networks as public infrastructure, the other as market-governed distribution systems. The implication was profound. Power over protocols increasingly became power over visibility. Algorithms as cultural arbiters. Above protocols emerged another layer of authority: algorithmic arbitration. Systems such as PageRank, recommendation engines, segmentation models, and co-occurrence networks no longer merely organized information. They structured public attention itself. Algorithms determined what appeared relevant, trustworthy, popular, or authoritative. Even seemingly technical systems carried cultural consequences. Locale-sensitive collation rules determined how language was sorted and tokenized. Segmentation systems defined what counted as a word. Recommendation engines converted link structures, hashtags, watch time, and engagement into hierarchies of visibility. Meaning became inseparable from ranking. Encryption introduced another transformation. Signal's double ratchet architecture altered the practical conditions for privacy, dissent, and political speech by ensuring forward secrecy and post-compromise recovery. In parallel, the European Union's Digital Services Act signaled a growing recognition that recommendation systems had become infrastructural powers requiring auditability and systemic oversight. The age of purely private platforms was beginning to give way to the age of algorithmic governance. When infrastructure spoke back, the fragility of digital civilization became most visible during moments of disruption. Cloudflare's termination of services to 8chan and later Kiwi Farms demonstrated that deep infrastructure providers could effectively determine public reachability. Amazon's suspension of Parler revealed that hosting infrastructure itself functioned as a gatekeeper of political audibility. Meanwhile, the 2021 Facebook outage showed how routing failures at the DNS and BGP layers could temporarily silence communication for billions of people. Egypt's 2011 internet shutdown revealed the same principle at state scale. Whoever controlled network infrastructure controlled the conditions of collective speech. These moments exposed a critical truth. Digital communication depended not only on expression, but on the continuous stability of invisible technical systems beneath it. Identity, trust, and public reality. Modern digital society increasingly depended on infrastructural trust. Let's Encrypt and automated HTTPS normalized encryption at planetary scale, transforming secure communication from a technical privilege into a public default. Browser distrust of Symantec certificates demonstrated that identity on the web could be rewritten through root store governance alone. Platforms also exercised extraordinary discretionary power during moments of crisis. Twitter's suspension of Donald Trump in January 2021 showed that platform moderation could function as a geopolitical speech act with global implications. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Apple and Google jointly deployed the GAEN exposure notification framework, demonstrating that operating systems themselves could become public health communication infrastructure. The stack no longer merely hosted society. It governed the conditions under which society coordinated itself.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of chapter number 2. I was too excited a few minutes ago when I said that it might be possible for us to have chapter 2 for less than 1 hour. And look at what just happened. We needed exactly, or we have needed exactly 1 hour if we count like this closing I am doing for this chapter. So please pardon me that I gave this spoiler alert that it might be possible for us to have it for less than 1 hour. Indeed, we didn't. And again, this topic is really deep. It is wide. There is so much to read. There is so much to uncover. the more people do research about it, maybe the more it will help us in our lifetime, during our lifetime, to better overcome the challenges or the situation that we face in our everyday life. So now we still have one chapter to uncover, which is also very interesting. We are stepping a little bit into psychology. Let's see how much of of psychology we can do. Psychology of communication and identity. Spoiler alert again, I am not a psychologist. I studied psychology, human communication, psychology and management for my master here in Germany, but I am no psychologist, right? So please do not go out there and say I am playing a psychologist role here. This is not the case. But sometimes, for you to understand situation XY, you need to look around and that situation and see the condition, the situation, the environment in which that situation has taken place for you to better understand. So this is exactly what I did here. I used a little bit of psychology to understand the new culture I will present at the end of this month. So stay tuned to see which one it will be, and stay tuned first of all for this last chapter of today's episode of Echoes of Change Culture in Flux podcast. I hope you enjoy your ride until here, and for the break or for the breaking for us to move to chapter number 3, let us play a little bit of music as always, to relax, to step back, to grab our popcorn, something to drink, because an interesting one is again coming. So hopefully you hold on until chapter number 3. Enjoy.